Hey, what's up, ladies and gentlemen? It's your boy Jonald, and it's Wednesday, and you know what that means? It's time for what up? I don't know. I just wanted to stare deep into the camera. I don't know which one's the telephoto. I mean, the ultra wide, and which one's the main. Can't stop being like that. Anyway, yeah. So this week's one-off. I was playing Helldivers, and it was making me think of military stuff, and then I had an idea for they always try to shout these empowering things, and this explanation is kind of post reading it, so I will let you get into reading it, but kind of military themed. I'm not going to pretend like I know a ton about how the military actually works, so there's a yawn, and don't come at me if I slightly miscalculated how the military functions, but anyway, yeah, let's get into the one.
The Ravioli Fighters. Written by Jonathan Howe. Read for you by Daniel Howe.
"Gentlemen, why do we fight?"
The captain yelled. Behind him, the battlefield raged. Bombs exploded, people screamed, and monsters keeled over.
"For liberty!"
The men yelled back.
"For liberty!"
The captain yelled. He turned to face the battle, leading the charge.
"For liberty!"
The men yelled. "For ravioli!" Baxter yelled, charging in after them. Everyone stopped. Baxter kept running for a bit, reaching the front of the pack.
"What was that, son?"
The captain asked. Baxter stopped. "Did you see something?" He scanned the battle ahead.
"No, I just want to know. Did you just scream, 'For ravioli'?"
"Yeah," Baxter said. "It's what I fight for."
No. You fight for liberty."
"I mean," Baxter argued, "you could say that, but all I care about is liberating the wheat fields so we can make pasta again, so I can eat ravioli again." Baxter glanced around. All the men looked at him as if he was an alien. He looked to the fighting, worried they'd be an easy target for an explosive.
"Kid, that is the dumbest reason I've ever heard for anyone wanting to fight,"
the captain said. Baxter looked away. He didn't need the captain to see his eyes.
"But I guess if you're willing to fight back against the enemy and not us, ravioli is good enough motivation."
The captain turned back to the fighting. He ran ahead of Baxter.
"For ravioli!"
the captain yelled as he charged into the fray. The other soldiers shrugged.
"For ravioli!"
they yelled, Baxter included, as they charged after their leader. It was a bloody battle, with many men being lost on their side, but none of the Ravioli Fighters were lost. Something about their small bond kept the men alive. When they returned to the barracks, other soldiers who'd heard the battle cry had given them the nickname. Baxter didn't notice. He walked to the decontamination chamber, left his clothes, washed off, then walked naked back to his bunk until he could get a change of clothes. People stared, but they'd stare even when he wasn't naked. Baxter didn't walk in a straight line because it left him open to enemy fire. He walked in a snaking motion, a sort of 2 steps forward, 1 step back. When he was younger, he'd tried explaining the necessity of it to his parents. What enemies? They'd asked. Baxter knew. Anything that had a mind could kill, and humans would often kill for no reason.
"Kid, can I speak to you for a moment?"
the captain asked. He'd entered the barrack just as Baxter finished getting dressed. "Sir?" Baxter said, snapping to attention.
"At ease,"
the captain said. "What do you wish to talk about?" Baxter asked, still standing at attention.
"I went back to look at your files."
"Sir," Baxter interjected, "I know what they say. I'm a good soldier. Captain Pexus wasn't a good fit." The captain raised an eyebrow. "Sorry, sir."
"I've interacted with Pexus. He's an ass."
The captain looked at Baxter, analyzing him.
"Do you really care only about ravioli?"
"Of course not," Baxter said. "I care about Dale and my Bricko collection, as well as Krung music."
"But not liberty?"
the captain asked. Baxter shrugged. "Is it really liberty? No matter who wins, we still be ruled over by some head honchos who want money and power." The captain looked as though he were going to disagree, but he stopped.
"Still, though, ravioli?"
I had it once with my parents, Baxter said. I want to do it again. The captain shrugged with his hands.
Well, if you fight like you did today, fight for whatever reason you like.
He left Baxter alone. Baxter used the rest of the time before dinner laying in his cot, reciting his Krung albums in order of most exhilarating to least.
Gentlemen, this battle is gonna be rough, the captain said. I want all of you to fight like you have someone to go home to.
He looked at each man in turn.
Your daughter, your husband, your grandfather.
His gaze landed on Baxter.
Ravioli.
Baxter looked away. He didn't like holding the captain's stare.
While we fight for liberty, what is the point unless we have something to enjoy it with?
There is none, the squad responded. The unit truck came to a halt.
What do we fight for?
The captain called, raising a fist.
For liberty!
The men replied, raising fists.
Why do we fight?
The captain yelled.
For ravioli!
The men cried out. They jumped off the vehicle, taking their place in the battle. Baxter ran with the men, rifle at the ready. He hummed to one of his favorite songs. Krung music had hard downbeats, which Baxter used to time his shots. It wasn't as fast as firing at will, but he didn't miss. Baxter followed his team, shooting when enemies lined up with the beat in his head. Around them, corpses of metal and flesh littered the ground.
To our right,
the captain called out. All the men turned, save Baxter. He spun the opposite direction. Behind them, while his squad dealt with the patrol that had appeared, Baxter vaporized a different unit which had tried to flank them. The captain had noticed his movements, sliding over to Baxter. "I'm sorry, sir, it's just that—"
How did you know that?
The captain asked.
How'd you know to protect our rear like that? I thoroughly inspected.
You're not mad? Baxter asked. Pexus would have been yelling and screaming by now.
We're alive. Why would I?
Baxter looked into the captain's eyes for as long as he could muster. I know these enemies, he explained. They use camouflage and a distraction to flank enemies. Last time they nearly got Pexus. The captain nodded.
You should walk up closer to me,
he said.
Let me know if you spot anything else on our way to the objective.
The rest of the men had finished defeating the main distraction squadron and had turned. They cried out in surprise at the horde of dead robots behind them. Well then, Baxter said, we should all move. Whenever a large group dies, they send a bomb to wipe out the area. Without a word, he started to flee. The captain yelled for the squadron to follow, his voice almost enough to cover up the sound of the artillery cannon firing in the distance. Most of the squad got away in time. For the rest of the battle, a grueling 2-day slog, Baxter was next to the captain. He would call out anything he saw, then go right back to humming. Through the captain's leadership and his perception, they survived to the final push without any more casualties.
We hold here until we get further orders, the captain explained to the men. For the time being, we lay low. No heater pod, no bright lights.
They set up camp. Baxter took his bedroll away from the main group, setting it off about 30 paces. When he'd finished, Baxter sat up, looking around. The captain walked to him.
Baxter, I didn't get to ask you yesterday, but why are you out here?
Baxter furrowed his brow. Pexus told me I'm the watch. Someone needs to be outside the group in order to make sure enemies can't sneak up. I understood. When you didn't automatically appoint someone, I volunteered. The captain tried to hide a grimace, but Baxter noticed. He didn't say anything, walking back to the group for a moment. Baxter looked out, putting together a bricko set in his mind. Out of the blue, the captain set his pack and bedroll next to Baxter's. Captain, are you trying to get us killed? Baxter asked. Pexus was very clear that the watch needs to do their job alone.
Well, Pexus isn't here. He's also not right about everything.
Baxter wanted to fight, but the captain sat, determined. They said nothing else, the captain eventually falling asleep. Baxter stayed awake until around 2 a.m. He shook the captain awake. Nothing to report, he said. Your turn, I guess. The captain nodded, groggily sitting up.
Does this mean you didn't sleep last night?
I did, it just meant no one was on watch. Baxter saw the captain's eyes flick to some kind of construct set up in the center of the men. He nodded. Thankfully, no one snuck up on us in the middle of the night. Baxter shrugged. We got lucky. He laid down, rolling over and falling to sleep. The captain shook him awake as dawn was just graying the horizon.
Time to move. We have orders.
The rest of the troop was beginning to pack up as well. What are those orders? Baxter asked. The captain paled.
Push on the target until it falls or we do.
Baxter nodded. He stood, wrapped up his stuff, and waited for the squad. When they started moving, he joined the captain up front.
You don't need to be up here today, Baxter. I might even need you to send word of our failure should we lose.
But, sir, if we fail, I should be dead as well, Baxter responded plainly. Pexis said,
Baxter!
The captain cut him off.
Pexis is a terrible man who uses others to stop bullets from hitting him. Stop relying on what Pexis might or might not have said in the past.
Baxter didn't say anything. When he'd joined the army, he'd been assigned to Pexis's unit. They'd told him, Pexis' word is law. That doesn't make sense, he told the captain. Isn't our goal to keep you alive?
Isn't your goal to eat ravioli with your parents again?
Baxter shut up. He kept pace with the captain, looking for enemies. When they came hard. The horde of robotic enemies swarmed over the hills, trying to overrun the entire army. Baxter called out movement and the captain relayed orders. They continued their push, numbers beginning to dwindle. Up ahead, a small building sat in the middle of a robotic sea.
That's the target, men, the captain yelled. We need to destroy that building.
The men groaned. Enemies had pulled away around them, joining the fortifications. Baxter glanced around the now cleared battlefield. Nearby, he found what he was looking for. He moved to the wreckage, beginning to extract a piece. Captain, he began to call, but the man was already there. Oh, we should make shields of this plating. It is resistant to the enemy's force bombs.
Baxter, you act like you've seen all this before.
I haven't, but they've placed all their heavies with this armor type on the outer edges. As if on cue, the sounds of artillery began going off. Baxter leapt, pulling the captain down under cover of the plating. When the barrage finally stopped, Baxter couldn't feel his left foot. The captain moaned quietly, but that meant he was alive. Too bad we can't die for a moment, so the enemies would leave our bodies alone, Baxter said quietly to himself. He peeked out from under the plate. The field was a blackened scar. Anything not covered in plating had been eradicated. The enemy robots were starting to scout forward. Damn, Baxter cursed. If only we had a distraction. A barrage of fire let off from the northwest, distracting the robots. They turned, scuttling the direction of the shots.
Are you psychic?
The captain groaned. He sat up as best he could, with legs burned off halfway down each shin. I didn't have any reason to think so before this, Baxter admitted, but now I'm beginning to wonder. They watched as the bots moved the battle away from the shack. What's in that?
An access pipe to the robotic hive mind. If we blow it up, the robots can't access their mind from this location,
the captain explained. Baxter nodded. He made sure he had a high-density explosive and began crawling.
Baxter, you need to get back,
the captain said. No, I need to blow up the hive mind.
It's just an access pipe. Besides, you need to go home. What about your parents? Ravioli?
Baxter stopped crawling, turning back to face the captain. My parents died in the bombing of Undell. The captain gave Baxter that look of shock everyone gave him when they found out. I was hoping to eat ravioli one more time before I died. It was the last meal we'd had together.
So that's why you don't care,
the captain said quietly. Baxter nodded. Guess ravioli will have to wait until I see them again, if an afterlife really does exist. The captain watched, speechless, as Baxter turned and crawled to the shack. Thanks for caring. It took a while, seeing as he only had one foot. Once close, Baxter had waited for a moment where the remaining bots weren't looking. He snuck by, crawling into the shack. A 3-foot wide pipe protruded from the ground. He slid down it, explosive at the ready. "For ravioli," he said, plunging down head first. When the explosion shook the ground, all the robots turned off suddenly. The captain sat up, saluting his fallen squad.
"For ravioli,"
he said. When he was eventually taken back home, the captain needed mechanical feet to replace his own. After months of physical therapy, he was able to walk on his own again. He took a snaking pace through the cemetery. It was odd, a type of 2-step forward, 1-step back type thing. He reached his destination without getting shot at. Not that he'd been walking like that for the sake of not getting shot. He crouched before the clean, light gray memorial stone.
"I don't know if this will reach you, but here's that meal you asked for."
The captain waited for a moment, letting his tears fall. When they dried, he stood.
"I'm sorry we took your life for our liberty."
He turned away, leaving the takeout container of ravioli before the headstone of Baxter and his parents.
And we're back. So yeah, as I was saying before, like, everyone's always like, for liberty or for freedom, and I was like, what if someone was just like, for ravioli? And everyone was like, you good? But then as I was developing the character, he did end up taking a very, like, Forrest Gump-esque, like, character traits. And I thought it was really interesting, and I got this idea of what if the reason he shouted for ravioli is because he was the only one who had the balls to say, I don't believe in your liberty. I'm fighting because I want this, but I don't, whatever you think you're fighting for and whatever higher message you think you're pushing, I don't believe in that. Like, I'll still fight because I have to, but, and that's something that I think if we're going by Forrest Gump standards, like, most normal people don't have the courage to say because they aren't willing to go out of that social norm. But someone like Forrest Gump would just say it because, you know, social norms are a weird thing to him. And yeah, so that was kind of what ended up happening with this one. I actually did enjoy it. I know I'm working on trying to pace longer story, like, get longer stories and pace them nice in a short story format because I don't have time to write a ton, but I also would like to write. And so this one came out fine. And my writing critiques aside, it's good. People probably enjoy it. I just, anyway. So with that, I will see you again next week. Remember to share this with your friends if you like it. I am working on slowly getting writing as something I can do for money. So, this helps me get practice, but also if people pay attention, and then I start making money from videos, that's cool. That's whatever. My real goal is to be an author, but I'm just rambling at this point. Thanks for watching. I really hope to see you guys next week, but until then, neat. Okay, bye.